everybody. I am so excited to be here, and we've got a lot of girls in the crowd. How about that? This is going to be a great talk. Well, I am so excited to be here. As Brenna said, my name is Elaine Ho, and I get to work, I think, at one of the most amazing places on the planet because I get to work at NASA. I'll tell you more about that in a minute, but they asked me to come and share some leadership lessons with all of you, things that I've picked up along the way. And so I know you all are scouts, and I know you guys get a chance to do all sorts of leadership building skills. You just went through some. You get to be in leadership roles. You have amazing adult mentors that advise you in scout leaders. Let's give it up for your scout leaders, by the way. They do some amazing work. Yeah, and so I wanted to not tell you the same old thing that you heard, but maybe share some things from my personal experience that might help you. So I was thinking about it. I thought, what would I would have wanted to know when I was your age before I started on my leadership journey? And so I thought about 3 things to share with you. And so we'll unpack that a bit and hopefully have lots of times for questions. So the 3 things I wanted to share with you is first, that leadership is more about the journey, less about the destination. Secondly, that leadership is all about the people, so don't forget your superpower of diversity and inclusion. And third, when you have a chance to lead, lead with a purpose. Okay, so let's dive in and talk about each one of those. So pro tip number 1, leadership is more about the journey, less about the destination. Why don't I even pick that one? So how many of you have, on the way here, you guys came in buses, right? Most of you? And you guys had to hike up the hill. When you were on that bus, how many times it crossed your mind, or did you ask, are we there yet? How much longer? How many more minutes? And then after you got your answer to that question, you went right back to looking at your phone or your Nintendo Switch or whatever it is. Yeah, because we're so easy to get there, right? We're so focused on the destination. And in life, what does that look like? That looks like focusing on the accomplishment. So maybe it's focusing on getting Eagle Scout, or maybe it's getting into that dream school in college. But you know, what I have found, and by the way, setting goals and setting those accomplishments is really important, but what I have found that sometimes when we focus on that destination, when we make it, and sometimes when we don't, we end up missing out on a lot of good stuff along the way. So I want to talk about that in a moment. But let me ask another destination kind of question. Who here has gotten the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? All right, everyone, you probably got that when you were 5, and you're getting that probably more and more as you get older, right? What do you want to be when you grow up? What kind of job do you want to have? What kind of career do you want to have? And how many of you would be willing to admit, I don't know, or I'm not sure? Yeah, a lot of hands. I was like that too. I didn't know. When people asked me that question, I got a lot of pressure from teachers, from my parents, from my other friends who I thought figured it all out. I didn't know. And so I want to tell you that it's okay. It's okay if you don't know, because what's really important, I found, was the journey along the way is where you pick up tools and experiences to actually help you to be a great leader. And so when I was in college, when I was going to college, I majored in civil engineering. It's not because I wanted to be, I had this burning desire to be a civil engineer. Actually, I really did want to go to Duke University and some other schools, but you know, it was really expensive for my family. And so I ended up getting an Air Force ROTC scholarship. The Air Force was going to give me a full ride. They were going to pay for my books, and in return, I would give them 4 years of service and come in as an Air Force officer. Not a bad deal, right? One catch. You have to major in what they tell you to major in. So you get about 2 or 3 choices, and I looked and I said, I'll do civil engineering. So I got my engineering degree, and then after that, I kind of actually took another direction. I went to law school, something really different. And I'll tell you what, it has been about 15 years, so that's probably about the age of some of you. It's been 15 years since I've practiced as a lawyer, and I have not practiced not one day as a civil engineer. So does that mean I made the huge mistake of like the choices that I made there? Well, if I was only focused on the destination, you would say so. But you know what? When I was studying to be an engineer, I learned how to take a really complex problem and break it down step by step by step to solve it. When I learned to be a lawyer, I learned to think logically. I learned to support my position with evidence. I learned to take a really complex idea and break it down in a way that a jury can understand. And guess what? I use those skills every single day as a leader. And so I just want to tell you that again, less focus on the destination, more focus on the journey, because these are I call them tools that you put in your toolbox along the way. So I've talked a little bit about why the destination isn't as much as a focus. Let me talk a little bit about the journey, because I want to share a little bit about that too. Because you think about a journey to leadership as this well-worn path. Lots of people become great leaders, so there's probably a formula to do that. So you think about it, probably on your hike on your way up here, you had markers and you had a path that you're following. In Scouts, you start off as a Scout, right? And you go to Tenderfoot, second class, you kind of work your way up, kind of all the way. You could go to Eagle Scout. Same way in the military. I started off as a second lieutenant, which is the first officer rank. They call that O1. I'm not in the Air Force active duty anymore, but I am in the reserves, and I'm a colonel now, and that's a O6. So you can see how we think that leadership is like this well-worn trail where you hop on this ladder and you climb up. What I wish someone would have told me is that absolutely that's one way to do it, but that there's a whole lot of ladders out there. And you know what else? It's okay to move from ladder to ladder to ladder. Because that's what I did. I started off in the Air Force, climbed that ladder for a bit, and then I moved on into corporate America, did that for a couple years, moved on into federal government, moved on into the White House. I then went into NASA, went back to the White House, and I'm back at NASA again. I've hopped a lot of different ladders. And you know what else? I didn't know that once you hop ladders, you don't necessarily have to go to the bottom and work your way up again. You can hop to the same level. You can hop close to the top. All of that is possible that I wish someone had told me. Because actually, I got the opposite advice when I first started. When I was in the Air Force and I did my 4 years and I was thinking about whether or not to stay longer, I made the tough decision to step away. And so when you do that, you have to fill out all this paperwork. You have to have your boss sign it. It's a whole thing. So I made the big decision. I filled out the paperwork. I actually went on vacation so that would give my boss a lot of time to fill his part out. When I came back, he still hadn't signed it. He wanted me to sit down and talk with him first. So I said, okay. I sat down and talked with him. And I appreciate the fact that he encouraged me to stay in. I appreciate the fact that he told me, Elaine, you can climb this ladder. You have such potential. And he said, look at me. Look at my career. I've stayed and climbed this ladder. But what he didn't do was to stop and think about what was right for me or what I was wanting to do. And in fact, he kind of made me feel bad about leaving. So when you're early off on your career, you kind of trust the people that are in charge. And so it was really hard after I had that conversation, but I kind of stuck with my gut and I took that leap to another ladder. There I was. I worked for a big law firm in downtown DC. It was a great experience. After a couple years, though, I decided I didn't want to be a lawyer anymore. It's a big, big jump. So I made that decision, got a job, and I went to my managing partner. Kind of went the same way. And, not only did he kind of make me feel bad about it, he actually warned me. He said, you know what, Elaine, what if you don't like not being a lawyer? What if you want to come back? I mean, you don't have a lot of time once you leave and come back. And so again, planting these seeds of doubt in my mind about whether or not I could do it. And so, but I took a deep breath and I thought about what is it that I wanted to do, and I took that leap to another ladder. And I'm so glad I did, because had I not done that, I wouldn't have some of these amazing stops along the way. And so I just want to tell you that it's really okay to hop from ladder to ladder. It's because it's all about the journey, less about the destination. My journey, and if you think about it as a road filled with twists and curves and construction and potholes, filled with, blind spots, but also filled with a lot of exits I didn't know that were there, scenic views, and I can't wait to see what my journey is going to take me to next. And so to round out that first pro tip, it's really the leadership journey that there is the one that you're ready for and the one you're ready to take, and that's it. All right, let me move on to pro tip number 2, that leadership is all about the people, and don't forget your superpower of diversity and inclusion. Okay, let me talk about that first part, all about the people. You all, I bet, are really good at sports or coding or gaming or art. You could be really, really, really good at the one thing that you do. But I'll tell you, if you don't have the skills as a leader to inspire people to follow you, game over. People will want to follow you when they feel like they belong on your team, even though they might be different. People will want to follow you when they know that you'll listen to what you'll have to say, they'll have to say, even though what they have to say isn't what you want to hear, like if it's bad news. And people will want to follow you when you encourage them to use their skills, use their talents to help solve really big problems on a team. That's when people will follow you. So how do you do that? How do you become that kind of leader where people will follow? Well, one of the superpowers I wish I had, that I wish I knew about, was the power that would motivate people to give their 100%. It's a superpower that will help people who are different work together and solve really big problems, and that is the superpower of diversity and inclusion. Now, I know some of you, when I say those words, you're thinking of like really sensitive topics that are hard to talk about, or sensitive topics that our country is really wrestling with. But I want to take a step back and talk about diversity and inclusion from a broader sense. So, I'd like and encourage you to think about it in that way, because this is how I think about it. Where diversity is just all the things that make us different. Simply put, all the things that make us different. And inclusion is having those differences work well on a team so everyone can give their 100%. So if you think about it, let's say you're a member of the team. You're supposed to be on this team, but for whatever reason, you feel excluded, or you feel like you're made to feel not to belong simply because you're different. That feels pretty crummy, doesn't it? If you have ever experienced that. And I wondered, given that you guys are this crop of girl troops, being in a mix of that predominantly is boys, even though this crowd doesn't reflect that. But it can feel kind of crummy. You can feel embarrassed or angry or frustrated, just kind of feeling like you don't belong. And if you're feeling that, do you think you're focused on what the team is focused on? Are you able to give your 100%? No. Yeah, here's some head shaking. No. So that's actually what I focus on at NASA. Is my job as the Chief Diversity Officer is to make sure everyone at NASA knows about this superpower, but is using the superpower of diversity and inclusion so that everyone on their team, or every team that they're leading, that no matter each individual, no matter what difference of perspectives, backgrounds, ideas that they're bringing forth, that they are feeling super pumped to work every day. And they're bringing their 100% every day. Because at NASA, we need everyone to be bringing their 100%. We need that innovation, creativity, problem solving, new discoveries. Now, some of you might be thinking, what does diversity and inclusion have to do with innovation and discovery? Well, what if I told you that there's actually a mountain of research out there that proves when you get a diverse team together, different people of different thought, perspectives, experiences, backgrounds together, and you get them working together as a team, they actually outperform. They come up with better solutions than those groups who have the same people and the same thought process and the same experiences. That is the superpower of diversity and inclusion that I'm talking about. And so as a leader, I guarantee you, whether it's in Scouts or in life, you're going to have people on your team that are different. And maybe they're different because you can see that difference. It's a visible difference because it's race or gender. But maybe it is about how you grew up. It's about where you grew up. It's about the fact that you grew up with 10 brothers and sisters and this person's an only child. It's about, have you heard of extroverts and introverts? Introverts get recharged being on their own. Extroverts like me get recharged of being around a lot of people. Really different. And all of those things shape the way you see the world, right? I like to think about it, all these things about us are the lens in which we see the world. And so as a leader, you're going to have people that have different lenses on. And so you have a choice. Do you want to take time to get to know and be curious and understand and see how your other team members, what they see through their lenses, and then use that superpower to your advantage of diversity and inclusion? Or as a leader, you can make the mistake of assuming everyone has the same lens that you do. You can make the mistake that because you're the leader and you're in charge, everyone needs to see through your lens. And what ends up happening are some of those unintended consequences that I talked about, right? Of where you have a team that doesn't feel like they belong. You have a team that, because they have a different set of lenses on, they're seeing the problem in a different way, and they're not willing to share it with you because they're afraid that you don't want to hear it, or that you don't, or you're not going to listen to them. And you know what? That's actually a problem that NASA had to learn the hard way. I'm going to tell you a story of a launch of NASA had back in 1986. It was a long time ago, but I remember it because I was in the 5th grade. I lived in Florida, and for those of you, anybody from Florida here? Okay, kind of an adult from Florida, but any from Florida? But so Florida, like the peninsula, I lived on the west coast of Florida, but on the east coast of Florida is Kennedy Space Center. Kennedy Space Center was getting ready to launch Space Shuttle Challenger. And the reason why my 5th grade class was so excited about seeing it was because there was going to be a teacher on board. I remember her name, Krista McCullough. She was going to be joining the astronauts and launching. And so we sat out there January, and I remember it being cold for Florida. It was the 50s. It was cold for Florida. But we went out there, and we saw the contrails and the smoke, and we saw it launch. But I distinctly remember then I saw it go to be like a Y shape. And what I found out later is that the Challenger had exploded, and everyone had died, including Krista McCullough. Fast forward, February 2003. The Space Shuttle Columbia was getting ready to do a mission with 7 astronauts to the International Space Station. Columbia took off, and upon re-entry into Earth, it broke apart. All 7 astronauts were killed instantly. Now, they did an investigation for both of those to discover why that happened, and they absolutely found the mechanical, technical reason for why that happened. But the bigger reason, the bigger problem, was actually that people knew about it. People knew about both things. And you know what? They weren't willing to say anything about it. They were afraid that their leaders wouldn't listen to them. They were afraid that if they said something, they would get in trouble. They were bringing a diverse perspective. They were seeing things from their lens, but were unwilling to share it because they were afraid. NASA at that time did not have an environment that valued diversity and had that inclusive environment where voices could come forward. That's quite the change now because they've learned from that mistake. Our country paid for that mistake with the lives of those astronauts. And so now we have a real emphasis on diversity and inclusion, about making sure that diversity of thought and perspectives and ideas and concerns can really come forward. Because not only is it so important for the innovation of NASA so we can explore outer space, but it's for the safety of our people. So I want to tell you that take a page, if nothing else, from NASA's playbook, and when you are leaders, to really use that superpower of diversity and inclusion for innovation and for the safety of your folks. All right, the last one I just want to touch upon is pro tip number 3, which is, and it'll be short, but it's important, is that when you lead with a purpose. You all as scouts, given what you have to do, you're going to have your choice of stepping in as leaders. And so when you do, step in with a purpose that you can believe in. Step in with a purpose that really you can be proud of. Because when you do, it makes a difference to not only your community, but for the people, for yourself. You can see it and feel it. For me, when I stepped in with a purpose and to help other people, I felt like a new sense of energy and commitment and excitement. And I can tell you that when things got rough, and they always did, by the way, it was that sense of purpose that could pick me up and keep me going. And I can tell you that happened more so than any paycheck. Because when I did take a job for a paycheck, when I did take a job where I didn't see the larger purpose, it was just the opposite. I kind of felt like no energy. I kind of felt like I didn't have that same sense of passion. And definitely when things got rough, I just didn't have that motivation to push through. So what does that look like? Let me just give you a few examples for me. But one is that, September 11th. If you ask anyone my age where they were when September 11th happened, they likely will be able to tell you the exact place. And for me, I was in Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, Alabama. And why was I there is because I was starting my training as an Air Force lawyer. I was just starting it. We call them JAGs. So the Air Force JAG School was down there. And we watched on the screen the aftermath of when the plane hit the Twin Towers and when the plane hit the Pentagon and the chaos that ensued. And I remember this profound sense of sadness about all the people who had died from that tragedy. I felt that, my class, our country felt that for the days, weeks, and months to follow. But we started to feel collectively this sense of optimism too as our country was coming together to help each other out. And I felt this sense of urgency about what can I do to help? So I found myself after JAG School halfway around the world at Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa, Japan. It was a place where it was a high operations tempo, lots of planes, lots of deployments going through there in response to this war against terrorism. And I remember feeling really proud. and really that I was there serving with a purpose that I believed in and a purpose that I was proud of, and making a difference as I was an officer in the United States Air Force in the time of a need for our country. And so because of that, I tried to take on roles that allowed me to have a purpose. You heard that I got a chance, I applied for a White House fellowship, got a chance to work for Michelle Obama in her office to let girls in developing countries get the education that they deserve. These were in countries where they didn't value girls. They treated girls as second-class citizens. They didn't even bother to have them have an education. But this effort was all about ensuring that those girls got the education that they needed. I then came to NASA because they invited me to lead an effort where students had the opportunity to pursue science, technology, engineering, math, STEM. And because our country doesn't have enough people going into STEM right now. And so it wasn't just reaching students in general, but those students who felt like they didn't belong in STEM because they weren't good in science and math, or those students who didn't have the same resources because their school or community didn't allow them to really get that inspiration. So my job was to make sure those students too belonged in STEM. So I'll just wrap up by saying that I'm glad I had those experiences early on to give me that affirmation that leading with a purpose is so important. It really made a difference in my world. And I know communities across your state, the country, and the world really need leaders with a purpose, and they absolutely need all of you.